Hello everybody, today we are going to be tying the pheasant tail nymph. This is part 2 of the Fly Tying 101 course that we're putting together here. We're going to talk about some new skills. The dubbing loop is one that we're going to touch on today with this fly. So this is just a very basic pheasant tail nymph, and it's a smaller fly, so that makes it a little bit more technical. So pull up a chair and your vise and tie along. And let's get right into it. Okay, today we're going to use the Sabre 7010. This is a dry fly hook. I'm using this for this nymph because I want it to be nice and light. I'm not tying it with any sort of a bead head or anything like that. You can definitely tie heavier as well, but with a lighter fly you'll sort of mimic an emerger when you want to. And you can fish it more like a wet fly as well. So I find that useful sometimes. Go ahead and get your fly in the vise. And start back from the eye of the hook at least the an eye width with your thread. Give yourself a little bit of room. I find that it's really easy to crowd these small flies. I constantly do that. So keeping your proportions is really important. The next ingredient that we need for this fly is some pheasant tail. Today I'm going to be tying it with black. And what you want to do is grab 3 pheasant tail fibers. Pull them off. Take the points, even them up, and then I like to roll them in my finger and just make sure that they're sort of fanned out in different directions. You can also just take and lay them in different directions. Okay. Now we're going to take the flat portion of the hook shank, not the overall length of the hook, but just the flat portion of the hook shank. That will be the length of our tail. And we'll tie that in. And we can just spread those out, make sure we have them fanned out a bit. Okay, now the next thing we're going to need is some gold or silver ribbing wire. You don't need a whole lot. And you're going to lay this down on top of the hook. What we're going to do is we're going to build some taper right into this fly right now. And the way we're going to do it, we're going to pull these fibers back so that they're in the back position where they need to be. We're going to wrap this forward loosely. We're going to do a dubbing loop up here. So what I'm going to do right now to build a little bit of taper is I'm just going to fold that wire back. Wrap that in. I'm using a 8/0 thread here today, and this wire, if you catch the edge of it, can definitely cut this 8/0 thread pretty easily. So watch out for that when you're dealing with the ends of the wire. Okay, now we're going to wrap forward, and we can build a little bit of taper right here with our thread as well. Just give it a little bit of extra bulk as we move forward. Something like that. Half hitch. And then I'm going to use, because this is a rotary vise, I'm going to use that bobbin cradle. Now we'll spin the tails of our pheasant fiber forward on the hook. So what we want to do is we want to wrap these up to the point where there's about 1/2 inch sticking up, and then we'll give it 2 loose wraps with our thread, then just pull everything tight and lock those back. So what we need here is we need enough material to make our wing casing out of, and then I'm actually going to use 2 of these strands, one on either side of this fly, to be the legs. Okay, now we will take our wire and we'll wrap that forward, and we'll wrap it the opposite direction that we wrapped the peacock fibers. So what that's going to do is it's just going to tighten everything down, lock it in an opposing way so that if a fish tooth or something cuts one of these fibers, your whole fly won't unravel. Okay, now we bring this up here, give it a wrap, lock it down with a couple and then we can just break that wire off. Sorry that the camera is focusing great. I'm going to hopefully be getting some little better camera here soon. That'll help with that. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do today is make a dubbing loop, and it's hard to see this thread right here, but it's coming down this way. And what we're going to do is we're going to come down at about 5 inches from our fly, and we're going to just put our finger in it and then bring the thread back up to the top here and wrap it off. So what we have here is just a loop of thread hanging off. Now at this point, there's a few different ways to deal with this, but basically you'll notice that your loop is open right here because it starts on either side of the hook, so it's open at the hook, and we don't want that. We want it to be nice and tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to spin this twice, crossing that over, and then I like to just pass the dubbing, pass your bobbin right through, and that'll give you a nice tight loop, and then you can get that in position. And we want to come all the way back here to where we stopped with our pheasant tail fibers. Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab whatever dubbing you want. Today I'm using the UV2. I do use this UV2 on all of my nymphs because we're doing a black fly today. We're doing a shrimp gray for our dubbing. And so I want these fibers to kind of be a little shorter because right now they're really long, and this is a short, small fly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to break them in half and then stack them on top of one another and repeat that until I have some fibers that are kind of the length I want. And we're going to make just a small stack of these dubbing fibers. Then you take your dubbing loop that we made a moment ago with our thread, making sure that it's open all the way down, and you just lay this dubbing right into the gap of the thread, in between those two pieces of thread. And then I like to use this style of a dubbing spinner or dubbing hook, dubbing tool. And if you just put this right there, kind of hook the bottom of your dubbing loop, then you can just spin the tool, and then when you pull it tight, it will have wrapped your dubbing up here nicely. And at this point you can sort of pick some out, kind of shape it a little bit. Again, we want to think about taper on this fly, so I want it a little shorter here and maybe longer in the middle and then shorter down here. We don't have to use all this dubbing, but it's a shame to waste it. So I kind of like to do it in smaller spurts, and I can add more later if I wanted to. But for this fly, I think will be just about right. Okay, so now I forgot to do this before. I need to lock off my thread, the 1/2 inch, lay that down, and now I'm just going to spin my dubbing right onto my fly. Again, keeping in mind that the dubbing is going to kind of create the profile in the water. It's going to give some sort of leg appearance. It's going to trap air, which is going to give this fly a nice natural look as well. Okay, so once I have all that dubbing wound on there, I still have the tail of this dubbing loop. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to spin it around my thread here. Just twist those together a couple times. Then take my thread around the eye of the hook. Do it again. And I'm just locking off that dubbing loop so that it doesn't fall apart on me later. Now I want to make sure that all my fibers are laying back. Give a couple of wraps. Now at this point, if you have really real long fibers, you can kind of just pull them off. I like to just sort of pull them off rather than cut them and trim them, because I feel like it gives a more natural appearance. Okay, and we have these 3 pheasant tail fibers still sitting here. So we'll part our dubbing here, and you can use any sort of a tool you want. You could even use your hand. I'm going to use this nice dubbing comb, and it's going to kind of pick out the dubbing as well. But I'll just pull it to either side of the hook. And then I'll take these 3 fibers and I will lay them down over the top of our dubbing towards the eye of the hook. This will create our wing casing. Give it a loose wrap, and you'll see that that wing casing goes over the top of the fly. Now because I have 3 of these fibers up here, so I'm going to take the one that I'm going to end up getting rid of, because I really only need 2 for what I'm doing here, and I'm going to pull it back, lock it down, trim it or pull it off, and I'm going to take these other fiber and I'm going to lay it back down the side of the fly, and do that with the one on the other side here as well. Give myself a nice head on the fly. I don't need a ton of material. Lock it down. I'll use my whip finish tool here. I'll just trim. And there you have it. Simple pheasant tail nymph. This thing fishes great. Hey everybody, thank you again for joining us today as we tied the pheasant tail nymph. Join us again next time for part 3 of the Fly Tying 101 class, where we'll get into some more skills, a little bit more complicated fly. Until next time, this is Charlie Warfield, thanking you for joining us and reminding you to fish more, catch more.